Doing, David?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing?
All good, thank you. Big
Good.
thank you to coming onto the podcast. We're looking forward to interview you. Um,
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Definitely, it's a pleasure to have you on. So I know you. I've known you for quite some time. You've always been great at what you do on the nutrition side. I know you've been in the boxing field for some years as well. I'm just going to run through a list of some of these boxers that you've worked with, so the listeners know, just how qualified and how good you are at what you do. So we've got Tyson Fury, Nicola Adams, Josh Taylor, Billy Joe Saunders, Kid Galahad, Kell Brook, um, get Gavin and Jamie McDonnell as well, Shabazz Masood as well, currently fighting, Ryan Burnett, host of more other names as well. So how did you get into working with boxers as a nutritionist? How did it all come about?
Well, I kind of fell into it really. I'd always been a huge fan of the sport. I'm from Sheffield, and in my teen years, we had probably, in my opinion, the greatest showman in boxing of all time from Sheffield in Prince Nazim Hamed. My dad was a big boxing fan. We had the Ingle gym, um, and so I kind of always had this interest. We wanted to work with athletes in some way when I started studying nutrition. I actually wanted to become a dietitian, but started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and got really into the whole sport and used to, like train with a few competitors and saw the way that they were all making weight was just terrible. Um, I've always been a good networker online. So I had a core group of other scientists that I would work with, and we helped kind of like together. We all kind of developed a bit of a new weight cutting method. Well, new back then, so this is probably about 16 years or so ago. Um, and then obviously my name started getting bandied around from just not just the jiu-jitsu guys, but MMA, and then from MMA to boxers, Thai boxers. I've worked with a couple of world champions in different combat sports, in Thai boxing and in different back then fractions of MMA and jiu-jitsu. And I just started kind of falling into it. Clients were coming my way. Had a few clients on the front cover of Men's Health. And my profile just started getting pushed, and then I just started getting more boxers wanting to work with me. And back then, I've actually not much has really changed. I'd only ever really get a call from a boxer when a weight cut had gone wrong, or they were struggling to make weight, or something was wrong. Very rarely did I get the call say everything's going perfect. Um, I just want to do better. And the next thing you know, I'm getting calls from world champions in America or aspiring world champions in America, aspiring world champions in the UK, and just ended up, working with some really, really good boxers, probably 12 years or so ago. And that was it then. My kind of name was attached to working with professional boxers at an elite level. And once that had happened, I was kind of cemented at working that level. And, I never really looked back, deviated off into different businesses. Then, I've worked with clients, athletes across multiple disciplines from football to sprinting as well. But always, came back to finding myself working with boxers. It's a sport that draws you back in over and over and
That's
over again.
so the famous Ingle gym in Sheffield. Must have been some
Mm.
stories coming out of there, and maybe pick your brain on some of those. So you were there whilst Nassim Hamid. Were you in the gym training or working
No,
whilst you just
I
like you?
didn't. I didn't train. I wasn't into boxing at the time, apart from being a fan. I was a mad football fanatic. Wants to be a professional footballer. That was the sport that I was keen into. Just a big fan of watching boxing. Difficult not to be as a 16-year-old kid in Sheffield. We were all into boxing really. We got people like Ryan Rhodes coming through as well. Then it was, boxing in Sheffield was good. Like we'd have Bomber Graham, we got Johnny Nelson, Ryan Rhodes, Prince Nazim Hamed. It was literally the glory years. My dad was a huge fan of the Ingle gym. And I mean, yeah, like I started obviously working with Dominic Ingle probably about 10, 11 years ago when I started working with Kell Brook. I'd been to
So
the
was
Ingle
Kell
gym.
Brook the first big name that you got as a nutritionist?
First big name on record, yeah, but I had worked with a few others before, but more in an unofficial consulting capacity. But yeah, when I was all in working with Kell Brook for the Hector Saldivia fight, that was the first one. And I'd gone from doing consulting work for fighters, like advising them on weight cuts and maximum performance. What a lot of online coaches are doing now, I was doing via email and Skype and what have you back then. Into being I'm all in on training camps. Went from doing that, having a really nice business, speaking with clients from America through to Asia and everyone in between, and having a nice settled business, to all of a sudden I'm working with Kell Brook. I'm on a training camp in Fuerteventura with 20 odd professional boxers and amateurs. I'm cooking food, I'm weighing supplements, I'm testing urine, I'm, doing all testing possible, overseeing S&C sessions, collecting heart rate data, feeding it back into a team meeting, and yeah, then lived with Kell in a hotel for a few months. Yeah, that was it. Set the tone, and that's how things developed and went on. And had a few articles written about me. Obviously, Kell's performance after, so the first Carson Jones fight was a bit of a car crash for Kell. He got the win, but it wasn't the performance, and that's obviously, when I got brought in, had the conversation, had an interview with Dominic Ingle, who put me through the mixer, and then he gave me the okay and said, yeah, he knows what he's on about. And back then, that was a big thing. Well, it still is a big thing. You get Dom's blessing is a huge thing. He knows the sport, but most of all, he knows people. So yeah, he would give me the go ahead and trusted me, and since then, I've got a cracking relationship with Dom, and I've worked with quite a few of his fighters. Been very fortunate to go on a few world title journeys with them over the years, and class Dom as a good friend.
I actually remember the Carson Jones rematch, because after the fight, Kell Brook actually brought you over to
He
participate
did, yeah,
on the TV interview, and you gave a lot of credit to
yeah,
yourself.
he
So
did,
maybe that's
yeah,
something we can touch on in one of the other
yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
How your work made a huge difference. And so
Mm.
you worked, as I said, you worked with a lot of great boxers, like Tyson Fury, BJ Saunders, Kell Brook, Josh Taylor. So can you share some highlights, of your experiences working with these guys, and what's been the most memorable moments of your journey so far?
I'll keep it PG, which probably excludes about 90% of the stories that I could share. So some of the highlights, obviously, working with Billy Joe, it's a daily highlight reel. Probably one of the biggest and funniest characters in boxing. Um, getting him to make weight efficiently is a huge task. Getting him to perform, because he is just an unreal, exceptional talent. Being able to support that is great. Being there in a hotel in Manchester whilst you're working with Billy Joe, being surrounded by Tyson Fury and Ben Davison, preparing Billy Joe for a world title fight at a new weight. They're all memories that I'm never, well, hopefully I'll never forget. But yeah, I guess some of the highlights were working with Tyson for the Deontay Wilder fight. So I did, most of the camp. They were in Manchester. They then flew over to Big Bear for the last the last 8-9 weeks, I think it was. So I didn't go to America. I did it all again remotely, and I had a holiday booked. It was a cruise from Barcelona to Brazil, and I landed in Brazil on the 1st of December, which was the date that Tyson fought Deontay Wilder in America. So I'm sending nutrition tip, or the nutrition guide and the diet plan and everything that Tyson needed all over the internet whilst I'm in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, to Ben and to Tyson's team whilst I'm on a cruise. Ended up in Brazil, obviously, where we docked in a beautiful city called Recife, and we were in a club when the fight was on, and I asked the DJ to turn down the music so I could watch the fight, and he did, and everyone cheered when Tyson got up from being knocked down by Wilder, and this whole club was like, so that was a moment like, I'm working with this guy, and I'm in this like bar place, and all the
Must have felt
accolades.
surreal.
Yeah, it was incredibly surreal. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm back working in boxing now. Um, I guess obviously Kid Galahad beating Jazza Dickens in COVID. That was a tough time. It was a long camp. He'd been in camp for a hell of a long time due to the delays, the change of venues, getting him down to that weight, but also able to perform was a huge task, and that really stretched me in terms of skill set and my own mental resilience to get him, performing and down to that weight, but obviously put in such a performance. I think I read the other day something like he fired off over 1,000 punches in that fight, and the whole hard work showed. So the other memories are, like when you fight and makes weight, you're in there, you're in the mix. You can't eat in front. Well, you don't eat. Most people choose not to eat in front of them. They're not eating a very big diet over fight week. You're in there when they're in the bath sweating. You're in there when they're skipping. You're in there in the sauna if needs be. You taking as much stress away from them as possible. And I remember weighing myself when Billy Joe made weight for his fight, and I'd dropped 9.5 pounds myself in the last
Up well.
in a few days. Obviously, it was all water weight and a bit of glycogen and gut contents, but not eating in front of him because he's a bit of a foodie. So
That's a
yeah,
good way
and
to
then
do it, isn't it? If you're going through with them yourself as well, that's all it
yeah,
adds to the
yeah.
whole experience and the sort of quality you provide if you're going through it with them as well.
Yeah, I think empathy is a huge thing.
Mm.
Everything I've asked a fighter to do, within the realms of nutrition and making weight, I've done myself. N equals one. I want to see what the strategies feel like. I've dropped 20 pounds myself for a weight cut over a week. I've pushed myself. So I know what it feels like. I know where you go to mentally, and I understand not just the science, but the application and the practical element of it. I think that's, for me, that's been quite important. I'm not saying that has to be done. I'm not saying that everyone who works with a fighter needs to have walked in those shoes. But for me, when we're looking for very small percentage gains where we're looking to make that, if we can make it that 0.1% easier, then we'll absolutely we need to do that. You ask any fighter, and that last pound that they've got to make feels like it's 10 pounds. It's a difficult pound to drop, that last pound. So me going through that, I can empathize. I know when it's emotional and when it's physiological, or the kit that I've had to test them. I know, like, is this them really telling me that they can't push anymore, or is this them the body really telling me? And I need to listen to both signals. I need to, the body can go further, but mentally they're telling me they can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That lends us quite nice to the next question about how do you approach tailoring nutrition plans for individual boxers with unique goals, unique needs, and can you give us an example of a customized nutrition plan that has significant impact on world champion performance? Maybe going back to that Kell Brook rematch of Carson Jones when he brought you over and credited you after the fight.
Probably a bad example for that one.
Really?
So yeah, so Kell had 4 stone-ish to lose for that camp for
Four
that fight.
stone.
Yeah, he
Wow.
was 40. Well, he was 14, just over 14 stone, and he got down to 10 stone. He had to win at 10 stone 10. We agreed for that one. So actually, not quite 4 stone, but a lot of weight to lose.
Yeah, yeah. And
Not not
how long do you have to
uh,
lose that weight?
9 weeks. We had
Oh,
that one. Yeah,
nine
we
weeks
had
to
that.
lose over 3 stone.
Yeah, I don't think he got much left in him by the time he finished Jones, but we knew that Carson Jones weren't going to come in peak performance. He had his one shot, and he'd not lived a life behind the scenes after that fight. If he'd have kept on it, it may have been, a bit more of a tougher fight. But yeah, that was a very, very difficult. That was a difficult camp for. It was very focused on weight loss, very much focused on weight loss rather than performance. And as a nutritionist, I consider myself as a performance nutritionist. I'm not there just to get a fight to make weight. That should be a given. It should be given that they're going to make weight no matter what. Anyway, that's what part of what they're paid for. But my job really is to make sure that they perform better. And I guess a good example of that was when I started working with Tyson for the Wilder fight. He was very he was very much bought into the ketogenic diet principles. It had helped him lose a massive amount of weight. So he was very much like, this is how I diet. This is what I need to do. I need to be this weight. His weight had gone up a little bit again. So for him to be in peak performance, peak weight, we just wanted him around, like 18.5 to 19 stone. So he probably got a couple of stone to lose, and he was adamant that he was going to go keto. I had to kind of challenge that, explain why he needed carbohydrates his weight. He was off to Big Bear for training. I had to explain, like, the need for certain foods, the need for the increased demand for certain nutrients, the body's new demands being at such high altitude, and why carbohydrates were crucial to that. So we moved on from he moved away from a ketogenic diet, all in on a ketogenic diet, to a more carb fueled approach. Got him back eating things like white rice, white potatoes, even just bread, as well as keeping some of his favorite foods in. Decent amount of red meat, a lot of healthy greens, vitamin C, all to help with the adaptations of the training, all to help support the adaptations that he needed for recovery. And I look back and I think, like, I incorporated some great recipes in that as well. Like, there's a peanut butter chicken that he kind of shouted about at one point after, said he was a big fan of that. I think he gave an interview and said it was a great meal that he'd been eating all camp. And it was like something he wanted to eat pretty much, every other day. So that was an interesting one. But putting things in, like making a chicken satay, but with orange juice in there to help with the sweetness side of it, but also to get more vitamin C and a little bit more sugar in, and a bit more fructose in there to help with recovery, but also to bump his calories up as well. They were the kind of strategies that we'd go in, and so how do I start off with a client, a boxer, a bespoke approach? Well, nutrition for me is the last rung on the ladder. It's your boxing training, it's the strength conditioning work, and then the nutrition is simply there to support all of that. So, you'll know as well as anyone that all boxers, like, not all boxers, but boxers fight differently. Some are endurance type boxers where they just output, may not have the biggest power punches, but they're just in your face all the time. And it depends what type of box we've got. If we've got someone who needs high output, high energy, but doesn't, it isn't Mr. Power Puncher, fights a little bit differently, or maybe even fights on the back foot, we will have a different strategy then. The training should look different. The physiology, conditioning work will look a little bit different. So that, obviously, someone who's just all out power puncher, come forward in your face, wants to get on the inside and just throw constant. So it's going to depend on the type of fighter, what the strategy is from the head coach, what his strength conditioning program looks like, to be able to enact what the coach wants to train, the strategy that they want to develop and implement in that next fight. The nutrition sits under that. So for me, basic requirement is blood work. Like how am I using blood work? Well, we want to look at a full range of vitamins and minerals, making sure that first of all, there's no deficiencies, but then how do we optimize that through nutrition? Then I'm looking at cardio-metabolic testing, so like gas analysis type stuff. So I'm looking at respiratory exchange, what the carbohydrate efficiency and fat efficiency is at both rest as a minimum, so resting metabolic rate test, but also then active as well. Then I'm checking stuff like body fat on a regular basis using I use an ultrasound device for that and tracking that. Are they losing fat? Is there any areas that they're holding fat? Is there any reasons for that we can see from blood work, etc.? And then if it's a high level fighter and they're really invested in that side of things, the nutrition support science, then I'll look at stool analysis and gut microbiome analysis, and we'll get a whole picture of what's really going on. And I'll use the training, what the coach wants, to support that nutrition for them on an individual level. So it will be an ever-evolving nutrition plan.
It's just very interesting. You mentioned that you tailor it to a fighter's style and how they fight. That's getting very advanced, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I think it's easy to test a fighter for body fat levels and check the weight, but you have to look at what type of fighter they are, and then there's no point in if a fighter is a pressure fighter and you do a lot of slow road work with them in a fasted state, well, you're expecting then that they become, what we term as fat adapted if they're doing that for long enough, so they become more efficient. But that comes at a cost. They're not as efficient at using carbohydrates. And well, what are they going to need if they're a pressure fighter on the front foot? Well, they're going to need carbohydrates, and they're going to need to be able to recover quickly. And if they're not as if they're not as good at using carbohydrates because they've not been doing the training to fight in that style, then obviously you're going to come into some sort of a problem at some point. So yeah, I think we should be looking at that. What kind of fighter is this person? What's the physiology? What is their fighting style? And again, there's a huge difference, I think, in and something that I think will evolve more. And I've been fortunate to be involved in a few camps in the last couple of years where this mindset is there, it's present. And it's every fighter turns up to win. Every fighter absolutely turns up to win. At a decent level when it's an evenly matched fight, whether it's going for an area title, a British title, or world title. Every fighter turns up to win that fight. They all want to win, but there's a huge difference between turning up to win and training to win, or training to beat your opponent. And I think some coaches really get that. How do you beat my opponent? And that means maybe adapting your style. And if you're going to adapt your style, then it would make sense that your strength and conditioning is changed to support those adaptations in the ring. And therefore, if the strength and conditioning is changed and your style has changed, then the nutrition should be tweaked as well.
It's a very, very interesting point. So I don't know whether this makes it easy for some listeners to understand. So, for example, someone like Andre Ward's got a reputation of being a very versatile fighter. If you want to brawl with him, he'll brawl with you. If you want to infight with him, he'll infight with you. So, in your position, then you would be advising him, all right, if you're going to brawl with this guy, we're going to change your training methods, your nutrition methods to support your ability to brawl with someone or be a pressure fighter, as opposed to outboxing.
The way that we look at it from a science perspective is what are the limitations that you currently have that stop you from fighting that way? When we really get into looking at the body and how it works, we look at the cardiometabolic system. Like we all use oxygen it's what's keeping us alive. So it's like a case of what is the key limitation? Is it your ability to breathe? Is it how you empty the oxygen from your lungs? Is it your heart rate? Is the limitation of the muscle? Where is the limitation for you to be able to fight like that? So it's all good and well saying, well, I'm a pressure fighter, but if you can't sustain that and your heart rate data is telling us that, or the gas analysis mask is telling us that you can't sustain that for long enough, then you've got some limiting factor for you to be able to fight at that. So we want to address what the limiting factor is first. And I believe that, with the correct training and nutrition, we can improve those limitations. And it's not about making what you're great at even better. It's about, ironing out your weakest link. Can we nudge that weakest link further up the chain?
So you mentioned earlier about Tyson Fury and his specific diet. Do you find that world champion boxers, there's some pushback on when you say to them, no, this is how you've been doing it, but this is how I'm going to do it. It's how it should be done. Do you find that because of their position as world champions, there's some sort of stubbornness in there, or do they openly accept whatever you say and you're the expert?
Well, my job isn't really to come in and say, like, you're doing it wrong. My job is always to come in and say, I'm here to make your life less stressful and to make you a better fighter. No matter my credentials and, my CV and the people I've worked with, no matter what I've achieved so far, the only thing that really matters is that fighter respects me. If I come in and chuck everything out and say, this is crap, this is not good, this doesn't work for you, well, one, I'd be wrong to do that because you should always build on what you've already got. But two, I'd just lose the respect of the fighter. But do I feel that world champion boxers who brought me in as world champions are open to change? Usually I'd say they are, because there's a level of respect there that, they've called me up, or one of their contacts has called me up and said, we need you to come in and help, and what can you improve? So they're looking for improvements. But that said, you have to deliver. When you're part of that team, what you say has to come true. If it doesn't, then obviously credibility, you have to have a very, very valid reason as to why it doesn't. But that's fortunately never been the case for me, or hasn't been the case for me thus far.
Okay, so what are the key elements that you focus on when preparing a world champion for a major fight? And how do you balance nutrition with other aspects of their training regimen?
Again, it's looking at what we're trying to achieve. In an ideal world, boxing would be a 24/7, 365 days a year job. in reality, it's usually a 30-week a year career at the top level. So they're in camp for 10 weeks. If we're lucky, we get them for 10 weeks, 12 weeks for 3 camps. When they're really at the top level, we may only get a 12-week camp twice a year. And in the really, really top level, we may get a 12-week camp once a year. So it's looking at what really needs to be achieved. Where are they at? The best fighters are the ones that don't get out of shape. So how do we juggle it? It's about having a very clear and concise plan. It's knowing what the recovery aspect is like for a fighter, what the recovery potential is, how far we need to push them, and when. If it's a fighter who needs to lose a lot of weight in camp, it's like how much weight can we lose and when. Ideally, I want to lose as much weight early as possible, whilst the intensity is slowly building. So therefore, when the intensity is at the maximum amount, they don't have to worry about dropping as much weight, and they can be fully fueled for that. So yeah, I think how do we juggle it? It's very, very individual that. I wouldn't say that there is one plan for each boxer that works across the board. It is about sitting down with the fighter, with the team, and planning out, well, what does the next X amount of weeks look like? It's looking at how does nutrition support that S&C? How does nutrition support the boxing work? How does nutrition support the recovery, the sleep? How does nutrition support, all of the output that they've got to do?
Okay, so then how would you help boxers maintain their weight, strength, energy levels, during the intensive training periods of a boxing camp? Which strategies do you use to employ peak performance? Because these boxers, they got to protect against burnout as well, whilst they're going through all these intensive multiple sessions a day sometimes. So how are you ensuring that peak performance?
Again, I'll refer to data, and I'll listen to the fighter a lot. I like to have good open conversations with my fighters. If someone's tired and lagging in training, the coach is going to tell me that anyway, and so is the fighter. But carbohydrates are such a hugely important fuel for boxers because of the nature of the work. And so is recovery. So for me, I'm making sure that they're having the right amount of carbs pre and post workout so we can enhance the preparation and recovery. I'm making sure that fluids are replenished. I'm making sure that the testing that we're doing is making sure that we've got the right hydration plan, but we've got the right nutrition plan, and that by the time session 1 is done, we're already preparing for session 2 of that day. And then as soon as session 2 is done, it's like, right, what does the nutrition need to look like now to get the best night's sleep, but also recover from this session and wake up tomorrow just needing to top up and go again. So carbohydrates are king when it comes to boxing. Protein is obviously, is hugely important for recovery, and then fats are sprinkled here and there through camp as we need them for, all the issues of, all the benefits for hormones and, for the brain and whatnot.
Okay, so you've been doing this for almost 2 decades. In that time, things have changed due to the advancements. So how has your expertise in nutrition and performance evolved over the years, especially with the advancements in sports science and research, and how do you incorporate those new findings into your approach of world-class athletes?
Well, the science I'd say the science merely catches up, really. What you read in research papers is very rarely stuff that we don't already know. We know how the body works. We may find some nuance in there, but we're always learning. And I have a good network of people throughout the world. Some great friends in America and out in Asia who have really, really been pushing boundaries in the realms of hydration, recovery, sports performance, and overall on the nutrition side of things. So we're always looking at, like, does this work? But the most important thing is to understand the mechanism of how something may work. If you understand the mechanism, you're applying critical thinking straight away. You apply critical thinking, you can make a very informed decision on, does this sound right? Does it seem logical? Will it work? Rather than, okay, what did I read in this published paper? Does that seem right? I'll try it out. Okay, trial and error. Does this work with X, Y, or Z client? I think, we're paid for results, really. We've got to deliver. Fighters get paid more when they win. So for us, we've always got to be ahead of the curve. Rather than if we're only using science that's in research papers, then we're using yesterday's news, really, aren't we?
So are there times then you have to trust yourself, make an informed decision?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, there's no research papers as such that show what the status is when you've done blood work on show what the strategy should be when you've done blood work on a fighter and tested urine and they're 3 days out from or 4 days out from a fight and they've got a check weigh in, and you have to deplete, rehydrate, and deplete again in a matter of days. There's no scientific paper that's gone through and said this is how it should be done. You have to understand how the body works, how it will respond, and what the right strategies are there, and use as much testing as possible to inform those decisions. Same with the business end of the weight cut. When you've got someone in a hot bath into towels wrapped up and you're checking things from blood pressure to heart rate to any urine that comes out and checking sweat rate, there aren't the papers that specifically tell you. There's no book written specifically of what to do when you see certain numbers on a screen. So you have to understand what the body is telling you. And that's not in a single research paper. That's in understanding the body of science that is the human body and performance.
Yeah, I suppose it's just being around the game, being around the people, and having that experience in the boxing world, isn't it? Because these are unique, specific to that, to the sport of boxing.
Yeah,
So,
it's extreme. We're operating at the extreme. That's the harsh reality. We're operating at the extreme, and a lot of the time, I'm paid because I like, unlike some other people who may not be experienced, I don't lose my shit when things don't go exactly to plan. I don't lose my mind because there's very, very few scenarios that I haven't seen or that are going to be new to me, and I know what to do. And probably the most valuable thing that I bring to a boxer's camp is that I know what to do when something doesn't go to plan. So I bring that assurance, that calmness. Don't stress because I've already seen it. This is what's going to happen next. And if you can say, well, this is what's going to happen next because you've seen it 100 times plus, then the box can just focus on, I'm just here, I'm the vessel, I've got to make the weight as easy as possible. I trust this guy, I trust my team, rehydrate, refuel, and then get in and take the other guy's head off.
yeah, it's very important because I'm sure most boxers are grumpy at the best of times when on the diet and having to make weight. So having someone like yourself there who can take that sort of stress away from them is invaluable to allow them to focus on the actual fight itself. So can you share a challenging situation where you've encountered working with a world champion, how you overcame it, and how did the experience change your approach or shape your approach to nutrition and training for high level athletes?
Well, probably a relevant one quite recently was Kid Galahad against Kiko Martinez. A fight that he lost, but was absolutely, bossing that fight until the Hail Mary. He obviously missed the weight on the scales. And there's a story there that he was tight at the weight. Barry is tight at the weight. He was big for that weight category, but he should have been able to make it. And we made the weight in time. In the bedroom, we have some of the most expensive scales that you can get, plus two other sets of scales to check. Because you can never be so sure. On all three sets of scales, he was on weight. We've gone down to the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, just across from the hotel. And when a fight is tight at the weight, you want them to get weighed and rehydrate and just crack on with the plan. What happened is we ended up sitting around for an hour and a half whilst Matchroom did what they needed to with weighing in on Sky and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't care about all of that stuff. I just care about my fighter's well-being. And you need your fighter to start sipping a little bit of water just to make sure that he's still cognitively there, that he can actually still get up and stand on the steps or on the scale. Sorry. Obviously, Barry got on the scale and he was like a minuscule. It was flickering over. And they called him as being over the weight, gave him a 2-hour window, and we had to go back to the hotel to get the last bit of weight off. and that was the first time I've ever had a fighter miss weight. And so it's new territory even for me, but I've worked with other nutritionists and mentored them when they've had a fighter that's missed weight. And so, I've got a good group behind me, a good, good peer network, good mentors as well, and reached out to them. We put into plan, but that effectively then took off 2 hours from what is a very tight rehydration and a refueling window for Kid Galahad. We had to, there was no hot, the room was no longer warm. We cooled the room down. The bath was empty. We had to run a hot bath again. So we ate into that 2 hours just to drop what effectively was a 0.0 something of a pound for him to go back. And we did that. I think it took us 75 minutes to do. But again, we were, effectively then 2 hours. That had a real knock-on effect of like, well, okay, now we can't get all of his food in him right straight away, but we're behind on our plan. So it reminded me that even when you have the best plan, even when you know your scales are right, even when you know that their scales are wrong, things can still go against you. And I realized that like I always have a plan. What if they don't know this? And with this, I had not utilized that what if scenario. So since then, any fighter I've worked with that has to make weight, I always make sure that my report includes a what if they don't make weight? What if their scales are wrong? So that's added in a new contingency. The irony being that the check weigh in the next morning because it was under IBF rules, so there's a £10 weight regain clause. We went and checked the scales the next morning and they were off again. So they were definitely bunk scales. But again, if they say they're calibrated, then they say they're calibrated. But I took a photo of the scales and I said, like, what does these numbers actually mean? And they couldn't answer.
That's got to be tough in such a fine line between making weight and the scales are. That's tough.
Yeah, but you have to pick your battles, don't you? Like, was it the right time for me to kick up a fuss about the scales? No, it absolutely wasn't. The right thing for me to do was just concentrate on my fighter, getting that extra little bit of weight out, reassuring him that it wasn't going to have an impact on him. We got back to, all of the metrics that we got to before the Jazza fight. We got back to them. It was just a little bit more hard work to get to them. Obviously, the next night comes, he's winning every round and then gets knocked out, brutally knocked out. So there's a large, finger pointing of like, well, was that the nutrition? Was it the weight? And in truth, yeah, the making the weight possibly had an impact on his punch resistance and his concentration. So it's it's something you have to write up in your report and chalk off and learn from. But was it just simply that he didn't make the weight on those scales that had that impact? Absolutely not. It was it's never just that one single weight making the weight aspect. It's always what happened leading up to that. It's never just a weight cut window of of a few hours or 36 hours. It's always there's always more to find in the camp than there is into the weight cut.
So that's quite interesting because can you describe taking that into account where you had to go through and follow those struggles you had with the weight, and you described the role mental resilience and mindset plays in the success of World Box Out Championship level. You've been around so many world champions. And so how do you support athletes in developing that mental fortitude required for such a demanding career, especially when you're dieting and that maybe that mental strength isn't always there because the dieting can take a lot out of you?
I mean, it may not be an answer that people will want to hear, and I may get a bit of hammer for this, but like it's the job. You've chosen this career. Like you can't dip in and dip out with boxing. You're all in. If you're not, then the other guy is going to knock you out, and that can have catastrophic effects on you, your life, your family, your income. If we want to get all emotional about food and dieting, then you're in the wrong sport. That's just the harsh reality of it. You can make things easier during camp by not being a dick out of camp, by not completely letting yourself go. If you let yourself go out of camp and then moan at how hard camp is and losing weight, that's on you. It's your responsibility. I don't have the most compassion for like, oh, I want to eat a muffin or I want to eat this or I need to eat something sweet. So what? It's 10 weeks and you're getting paid hundreds of thousands, possibly millions for this fight, and you're being asked to just dial it in for 10 weeks because you messed around out of camp. Dial it in, reap the rewards. Probably not the most PC of answers. But, I'm not. I'm there to. I want to win. I hate fighters losing. I hate my clients losing. It probably affects me more than it should, but it leaves a scar. So the mental resilience, like I want to know that a fighter's got that, and I want to know that they've got control on that. I've worked with some fighters who've got that. Billy Joe, unreal mental resilience. Josh Taylor, an animal of mental resilience. Tyson Fury, personified. Kid Galahad, no one as stoic and mental resilient as that guy. If they all can do that, well, you just have to look at what they've earned from the sport, what they've achieved in the sport to know that you've just got to switch off from it. Yeah, you're not going to like it, but really, it's not all sunshine and roses when you're a boxer.
Have you ever had to give a boxer some half truths then?
Yeah, of course.
Was it exactly
Always,
what you just said?
yeah, but always via WhatsApp, never face to face. I don't want to get knocked out.
Okay, so I mean, I've noticed recently you started your own company named Nuvictus. So how does your company Nuvictus, how does it contribute to overall well-being of athletes, individuals, drawing on your experience with world champion boxers, and what sets your products and services apart in the industry, especially for those striving for peak athletic performance?
So New Victors came around largely because of the work that I'd done with professional boxers. I was always going back to certain supplements. I was using fruits and greens-based powders to help improve and increase the nutrient density, nutrient availability. I was using what we class as like, smart supplements to help with concentration and focus during, whether it's a video analysis or whether it's a technical session. I was using mushroom blends to help with improved performance, and using probiotics and digestive enzymes to help with gut health. That's one of the products that we've got, which is called Beyond Green. So was all these different products that I was using for boxers. I kind of made my own blend and then said, well, actually, these are working really well for busy people who want to achieve more. Boxers struggle to switch off, especially in this day and age when they're all hooked on Instagram, social media, YouTube. So helping them sleep, helping them switch off, would very much rely upon supplements. So again, I built a supplement stack. L-theanine, Montmorency cherry for helping with recovery and falling asleep, CBD, lemon balm and chamomile, all these ingredients to help them switch off and get into a deeper, more restful sleep. So I knew I'd got these products I was using for boxers, and athletes, or well, all athletes really. And I was like, actually, I use these as well, and all my other business exec or high achiever clients using them. So like, if people want to achieve something, then these are going to work well for them. But the foundation of any plan and understanding health for me is understanding your blood work. It all starts with the blood. So we put together as a business model 2 supplements, which is a subscription package, and we include a blood test as well. And we include educational resources so you know more about the blood tests, the supplements, and about your own health. We've packaged it all together in what we think is a very underpriced offering at the moment. And that's what makes us different, that we're bringing supplements together, a supplement stack together that is, has been formulated for high achievers, some of the best in the world over the years. A sleep stack or pre-sleep stack that helps some of the most busy minds in the world switch off and get a better night's sleep, and blood work. Because if you MOT your car every year, why wouldn't you MOT your body? And that starts with a blood test. So that's how we're changing the game with Nuvictus. That's what we're doing different. We're giving these things as accessible. We have, a great founder team. We've all achieved, and we've got some great ambassadors that are coming to the forefront for us now to really promote what we do. So yeah, that's what we're doing different.
Is there any specific product you have which you would recommend for boxers, whether they're hobbyist boxers or competing boxers? Which product do you think would most suit the boxers maybe listening to this?
I mean, we don't do a one-time purchase. You're all in with us. That's what we want. We want people all in. But the Beyond Greens is an unreal product. If you struggle with food variety, if you struggle with afternoon slump, feeling a little bit tired, if you struggle to focus and concentrate through your training sessions, if you don't feel you have the best digestion and gut health, then the Beyond Greens is great. But similarly, if you struggle to fall asleep, if you wake up feeling tired, then our other product, which is called R3, you're not going to find a better product on the market than that. And if you really want to know what your health really is, and what's going on underneath the hood, then our blood test is as comprehensive as you can get on the market. It will tell you what needs to be improved, what lifestyle factors need to be improved, the health of your kidneys, vitamins and minerals, and your fat profile, and how you're handling carbohydrates. It's as comprehensive an offering as you can get.
So is this a food supplement or a meal replacement? How would an athlete take this?
It's a supplement. So the greens is a powder mixed in with water. We've got, on average 9 out of 10 on flavour. So it's not like drinking muddy water like greens powders of days gone by. And then the R3 is 3 capsules, a couple of hours before you go to bed. The first 30 minutes, you'll start to realise that your brain activity just calms down. 30 minutes after that, you'll realise that you feel a bit more zen. And then after that, it's, the last hour is right, okay, get ready for bed. And as your head's on the pillow and you're asleep. So 3 capsules, and it's like having a big cuddle off Tyson Fury before you go to sleep.
But do send me the links for this so we can put it in the description.
I will do, mate. Yeah,
the YouTube video, so if anyone wants to have a look into that. So do you have any future goals, aspirations for Invictus and your work with athletes? Any upcoming projects or initiatives which you'd like to share with the audience?
I think with Invictus, we just want to save a few lives. We feel that, we've already, with the blood test, we've already found things on the blood test on a couple of people that we know that now they can make changes. It will prolong their life, give them better quality of life too. But our aspirations are just to become, a great company that offers great resources, offers great products, and we can use that as a platform to move into the big space of bespoke nutrition, which we feel will present itself in a few years. So everything that we do, which currently costs clients, high-end athletes, thousands of pounds, we want to condense that into more attainable offering for the general public. Like I said at the beginning, like the really in-depth stool, urine, blood testing, all of those things that really help us give someone something very bespoke. We feel that that's where the future of nutrition is going to be, and we feel that this business is moving towards that. So yeah, that's our goals, for that to be the leader in bespoke nutrition in the next 3 to 5 years.
Great stuff. I'm sure with your background expertise, you'll reach those goals. So we've had a lot of user questions, probably more than any other guest I've had on the podcast. But so many questions come in, I've had to filter quite a few out because there's just been so many. So I'm going to start off with a few. We've got about 10, 12 here. So the first question we've got from a user is, his name's Adam, and he wants to know how to keep the brain healthy whilst boxing. I'm assuming here maybe he's referring to hydration, rehydrating when you're sparring, that sort of thing.
So there are a couple of things. Obviously, taking regular punches to the head. Hydration is absolutely key. Fluid around the brain and hydration is absolutely vital. Dehydrated, we know that concussion can have longer term effects in dehydrated athletes. So I'd say staying on top of hydration. I'm a big fan of using things like collagen as well, and omega-3s. The brain loves omega-3 as a fuel. It's a big old fatty lump, is the brain. So making sure that there's a good amount of omega-3 available for it as well, for regeneration. They're probably the main things. Things like creatine as well. We've seen creatine monohydrate. Probably the best supplement you can take, and we've seen that positive reports on that for athletes for contact sport athletes like American football. They're known to obviously dive in with the head, rugby, but also boxers and MMA fighters too.
This actually reminds me of an interesting incident. So post-concussion syndrome, for example, is there anything you'd recommend to help the process? Because it can last up to a year. So you may have a boxer whose livelihood is boxing. He suffered a concussion. The usual rules, 28 days. But he may have post-concussion syndrome, which may last up to a year. So his livelihood depends on this. Are there things you advise for supplements that may help with the process?
Yes, there are, but it would be quite bespoke. So for me to give a blanket bit of advice, there are certain things, like I said, all the things that I mentioned before, like the collagen, omega-3, hydration, even potentially creatine, they've all been shown to help. But um, I would definitely go, I would definitely work with the doctor post incident to come up with a bespoke plan for the fighter, rather than just giving them a blanket, here's what you should do. But yeah, that would be my approach, to work on a very individual level for something like that. Because obviously we want them to return to players or
Yeah,
return to fight as soon as possible, and that requires quite intense, but also quite specific individual advice too.
good stuff. Okay, so your boy Nick. So what is the best workout routine for cardio in the ring? So he says here, meaning miles ran and mile time. So I guess he's looking for a sort of barometer or a benchmark, which sort of lets you know you're doing well. Maybe it's specific again to weight as well, isn't it? I mean, someone's a heavyweight is going to run the same sort of speed as a featherweight.
I mean, he's asking, like what he can do to be better in the ring, better condition in the ring. Like there's no running track in the ring, and he can't wear his spikes. He's not a runner. So the best thing you can do for conditioning in the ring is more work in the ring. Like the best bricklayers aren't the guys who've just learned to, lay a few bricks a few days ago. They're the ones who've been doing it years. And it's the same with boxing. Every great boxer wants to spend more time in the ring, because that's where they become better conditioned. They master the craft more. I think there's been a huge, huge lean into running over the past decade for boxers. And whilst it does have its place, nothing beats sport-specific training, whether that's bag work, pad work, or some sort of sparring, body sparring. But ring work is by far the best thing for conditioning. Your running should really be a supplement, so that I can't give a distance, pace, time, or whatever, because I don't think it should be a priority. I think it should be a supplement to your boxing work. And all of the coaches that I've worked with, that are at an exceptional level, they see running as being okay. Well, we can't just have them throwing punches, you know, 14 sessions a week. We've got to do something else to give the hands, the shoulders, the upper limbs a break. So therefore, how do we utilize running? And therefore, I would say things, like the sprint work, 30-30's got a lot of press, or a lot of recognition a while ago. Doing work that gets you into the red zone. How that transfers over into the boxing ring, I'd say we're still not overly conclusive on that, and it should never replace boxing work anyway.
Interesting. Okay, so he also asks the best exercises every boxer should be doing for speed and power. I know you're more on the nutrition side, but would you advise, whether from your experience you've seen, you manage coaches as well, strength and conditioning side, is there any sort of exercises which you believe are best for speed and power in the ring?
What I will say is I'll give a shout out to a couple of S&C coaches that I've been very, very fortunate to both work with and learn from, Yaz Parr and Jonathan Payne. And they are exceptional S&C coaches. I've learned so much from them. Been great coaches to work with. Yaz wrote the book on strength and conditioning for boxing and combat sports, so he is the go-to guy. And the irony is that no one training camp program has looked the same for any two boxers that I've worked with them on. And that's because boxers are different. For power and strength, well, you may have a limitation in shoulder mobility, lower back, may be tighter. Your hips may not move and rotate as well. So saying, oh, well, you do this type of press or this type of exercise, there's no one exercise that every boxer should absolutely be doing, because, again, blanket statements are very, very, very rarely applicable in boxing. I'm going to take the scientist answer and say it depends. It depends where you're at, where your development is, but I'd like to think that all boxers can push weight, they can pull weight, and they can stand up with some weight. So, the old basics of, can they bench, overhead press, can they deadlift and squat at decent amounts? Are they absolutely needed for them to be a strong and powerful and fast athlete? No, but they're good movements for most people. So yeah, I can't give you an exact, you must do this exercise. So I'm dependent. It depends on that one.
Okay, so Joshua Feldman asks, thoughts on animal-based diet for fighters, and also thoughts on running every day in camp.
If we're talking like animal-based diets, in like eating animal produce, like meat, then yeah, I'm a fan of meat. I've worked with a few vegan athletes. Not saying that it's wrong. It's just certainly easier to have an animal-based diet. If he's asking more in line with the current fad extreme carnivore diet, I'd say that's just absolutely ridiculous for an athlete. There is no need for an athlete to be eating a carnivore diet, and we're not going to see world records broken by by someone eating carnivore. And what was the last part as well? Sorry.
So thoughts on running every day in camp. I suppose you kind of brushed on that in the previous question, didn't you, about the supplement, running more as a supplement. But do you find guys are running every day in camp, or is that back in the day you'll see like fighters running 6 days out of 7, for example? Is that something that's changed now?
I think there's a time and a place for running. As I said, if like you can't just be letting the upper body do all of the work, or the majority of the work throughout the camp. So mixing things up and having an alternative way of getting that workload out is good. But I certainly think the road work, as we used to call it, or maybe still is called in boxing by some. It can have its place, but again, it's using it as and when needed. Doing 7 days a week, 6 days a week running, I'd ask like, well, why are you running and not boxing? Or if you are boxing and running, why are you feeling a need to add the running? Can you really get the most out of your boxing if you're doing the running? If you were to take the running out, could you therefore have a more high intensity, more impactful boxing session?
Good stuff. Right, so Fayaz, he asks, how to eat whilst cutting weight, training and maintaining performance? But I guess it's a very general, broad question for you, isn't it? So I don't know, guys, there's going to be more individual based, but quick thoughts on that one.
I think quick thoughts are, if you've got to make weight, carbohydrates are key. Think about where you're going to place them. Fuel and recover. They are your main strategies. So am I fueling for the workout required? Am I recovering correctly from that workout? How important is protein for that recovery? Therefore, how much do I need? And do I need as much fats as I would when I'm not making weight? For me, short term, I don't mind cutting fats quite low because I know it's an easy way to cut back on calories. But also, is my training optimized? Am I feeling like I'm getting the most out of every session? If not, how do I tailor my nutrition to make sure that those important sessions are absolutely well fueled and well recovered from, so I can keep going with my training and progress. Day-to-day weight watching is detrimental psychologically for a fighter, unless you only really need to be checking that if you're if you can't stick to the diet plan, or if you're close to making weight and you have to stop manipulating variables. I'd say having a calorie deficit, we parrot that, but knowing what a real calorie deficit is, not just going off, some arbitrary, I've pulled these numbers off a calculator online, and controlling the food that you're eating. Do you know where that, has that food being made by yourself? Do you know if there's any extra calories hidden in there, if you're buying food out, and being in control of the whole diet as much as possible. There's less room for error when you've got to perform and make weight. So controlling as much of the controllables as possible is my approach on that one.
Well, I had a Bakewell tart before this. I'm going to have a Bakewell tart after this as well.
Good man.
Right, so Laxdar, he says, I'm 5'7", 77 kilos. I've tried keto, intermittent fasting, low carbs, but nothing is sustainable or efficient enough. So what's the best way to lose that stubborn body fat?
I mean,
do you take into account ethnic sort of backgrounds as well?
It can have some influence.
Do you find that some ethnicities maybe more carb resistant or more carb sensitive?
I wouldn't say ethnicity would be a key determining factor for me when writing that plan. But I would say that different cultures have different food environments and different foods that they are that they have as a preference, and I will account for that. like a South Asian type diet, well, we know that there's a lot of ghee in there and a lot of fat, so therefore, like, that's highly palatable and it brings a lot of flavor. How do we then say, okay, well, that highly palatable, highly fat meal needs to be replaced by something lower in fat and higher in carbs and higher in protein? I would account for that first and foremost, rather than DNA based on ethnicity. So yeah, I would look at like physiology based on ethnicity. Yeah, I would look at food environment as being more valuable than just ethnicity.
Okay, so did there any sort of advice you'd recommend on the best way to lose that stubborn body fat, taking into account he's gone through loads of different dieting sort of routines?
I would say he needs to be honest and say, like, why are they not sustainable? That's a him problem. There's nothing wrong with these diets if they all achieve a calorie deficit, but if they're not sustainable, why? Like, why are they not sustainable? Is it because he can't stick to them, because there's not enough flavor in them? Any diet, like all diets work, they all work by creating a calorie deficit. That's just the premise of them. You create a calorie deficit and the body will release stored body fat. Some diets are more maintainable than others. That's why some people can, if it fits your macros approach and just count Haribo and Bakewell tarts and whatever else and come up with a number at the end of the day and go, I'll have hit my target. Whereas others, they absolutely need keto. The one who can handle the food variety and the Haribo and Bakewell tarts, they're just probably very disciplined around portions. The one who can't and has to go keto is probably just better with having really strict boundaries and knowing, like, no, I cannot eat carbs, no, I cannot eat this, I must eat this. So it's about finding the psychological approach really for him. Is it really stubborn body fat? Like if we were to lock him up in a metabolic ward and feed him, the basic food that he needs and for his metabolism, he'd probably lose the body fat. So is it stubborn body fat, or is it stubborn attitude to sticking to adhering to a diet plan? It's usually the latter.
So do you think it's a matter of finding the right diet for your lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nutrition is a very nutritionist job will probably be out of. We probably won't need nutritionists in a few years. It'll all be AI driven. And nutritionists of the next 5 years will be far, far more skilled in psychology than they will in the science of nutrition. We don't have that many more advances to go, I don't feel, with regards to nutritional science and physiology and the way the human body works. But we've never had as much food abundance. We've never had as much calorie abundance. We've never had as much food variety, and we've never had as much highly palatable foods. And we're all human, so we're all going to find it like difficult to
That's
to
something AI won't replace, is that human touch you mentioned, being the psychology side, having that sort of social interaction. Regardless.
I mean, it won't replace empathy. That's the one thing that we know it will never replace. You can't be empathetic. But also there comes a point where empathy is of no value when it comes to your health and nutrition. You have to just switch off and go, okay, I need to do X to get Y. And it doesn't matter what I think or feel about it. My feelings are irrelevant. Physiologically, I'm not optimal. I'm not performing. Therefore, I need to follow this plan. But yeah, I think the majority of dieting and nutrition is psychological. So if the guy's saying it's stubborn body fat, and none of the diets are sustainable, then if you ask the question, I would ask the question, therefore, like, if he was able to remove feelings of determining what sustainable is and just stick to it for 12 weeks, does he feel that the fat would come off? The likely answer is yes. So it's finding the one that you can stick to for long enough to get rid of that stubborn fat.
Yeah, I mean, going back, you mentioned about South Asian diets. There was a question of can we include samosas and pakora in the diet? I chose not to include that one. But can you? Just for my information.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, I lived with Shabazz Masood for a while, and his mum used to send a pack up with him back every Sunday night. Monday, I used to eat like a king. Pakoras, samosas, some of the best curries I've ever eaten. Unbelievably beautiful food. I'd never ever say to a fighter in camp that they can't eat that. but it's finding the right place. And it's like, does this fit with what we need to do? At a certain point, we're probably going to have to say, no, it doesn't. We need to stick to, the more plain, boring or whatever and make that as fancy as possible. We should be able to fit most foods in. And the problem comes really when we have to be far too aggressive with nutrition because a fighter hasn't kept themselves in shape out of camp. That's when we have to really restrain and restrict.
Okay. Okay, so Zubair asks, what do you consider when deciding the weight a fighter should fight at? Do you advise a boxer's team whether the fighter can change weight classes, whether it's beneficial for them to change weight classes? And then how would a fighter know what weight they should be fighting at? Say the latter question, how a fighter would know, perhaps more aimed at the amateur boxing, I'd suppose, when they haven't got to pro level yet and they've already everything set in place.
I think, I predominantly work with pros now. I have worked with a few amateurs. And so I'd say it's a little bit different. I'd say amateurs, if you're young and you're developing, it's about having honest conversations with your coach and monitoring like how easy it is to get through those training sessions. Like, are you really dragging yourself through those sessions because you're having to hold your weight? If so, that's when it's time to have a conversation and saying, yeah, I'm doing everything nutritionally, but my training is suffering. Therefore, my career progression is going to suffer because of that. It might be time to move up weight. As a nutritionist, I would just be very open to having honest conversations with an amateur fighter and testing them in terms of like, have they grown? Have they developed more muscle? What is their sleep like and recovery like? And are there signals there to effectively advise that they would be better moving up weight? It's a little bit different in the professional game. Like there's some people who love to espouse on social media that like a fight is too heavy, like they shouldn't be fighting at a weight, all this, that, and the other, and that you've got a job to do and a role. The reality is these people won't turn a world champion down if he comes to them and says, I've got 4 stone to lose in 8 weeks. You just get the fucking job done. You're paid to get the job done, so just get your job done. Who am I to tell X, Y, or Z world champion that he needs to move up in weight? I'm there to say I can do the job or I can't do the job. But there aren't many nutritionists that will walk away from a world title fight or a camp because we go through a lot and we take a lot of stress. So it's not for me to say you must move up weight. Probably the opposite is being more true for me. Like where they said I feel like I need to move up a weight, I've advised physiologically, nutrition wise, if we change things a little bit, if we start a little bit early, if we don't balloon up, we can maintain this weight and still improve your performance. In some instances, I've advised fighters who have been in line for super fights with guys in the weight category below that I can get them to that weight if required. If we really need to, and I've advised them what would need to happen for them to get to that weight. My job is to advise what needs to happen for them to make that weight as safely as possible, but not relinquish any of their performance advantages and maintain a high level of performance. So I don't advise a professional fighter to move up or change weight. I advise, what needs to be done for them to make that weight, and that's my job.
Okay. So Kelton asks, what should boxers eat after weigh-ins? And that's for both amateurs and pro boxers.
Again, there's a different approach, really, slightly different approach for amateurs, because obviously, unless you're weighing in the day before, but most it's going to be like on the day. Well, the first rule is you put back in what you last took out. So if the last thing you took out was water, the first thing you need to put back is water. So it's rehydrate. After that, it's glycogen. So we need to start filling glycogen stores back up quite quickly. So for me, it's going to be straight after weigh-in, it's going to be some sort of hydration drink. Usually that's bespoke to the fighter. So the rehydration protocol will depend on how much they have had to sweat out and lose, like how much sodium they require. And then after that, it's going to be, well, how much glycogen do we feel that we took out? How do we replenish that quickly and more efficiently? So that could be first starting with powders that are easy to digest. It can be using carriers that help to, get that carb powder through into the muscles, into the cells. And then after that, we start moving on to foods that they are accustomed to. No new foods is one of my key terms in fight week. So we don't introduce anything new that they haven't had in camp. So we just reverse out. So we start with rehydration, replenish glycogen, and then fully refueling up and eating the foods that are required. That would be my strategy. So whatever you take out last, you put back in. With amateurs, we look at can we manipulate fiber so they're not holding as much in the gut, so we get that advantage. We know that carbohydrates, putting those back in, if we take them out and try and put them back in, we've only got a small window. We know that they're going to have some sort of problems with performance. So for me, I would want to leave carbs in, but I'd change the carb format as again going to more liquid, more light fiber, or low fiber, low residual fiber type foods. And then my preference would be to leave carbs in, but use dehydration, because we can rehydrate quicker than we can replenish glycogen and it become effective to be a competitive fighter. So they would be my protocols. But again, we look at the individual. What are the timings? What type of fighter are they? What are the demands of the day? If it's a professional, we know that we've usually got at least 36 hours before they need to step in the ring. So we've got a big old window to fill them back up so we can push the boundaries a little bit more. With an amateur, I wouldn't want to be taking, too much out. I'd be, a couple of percentage of the body weight out would be probably a limit. Any more than that, and I'd be thinking we might be affecting performance here.
Okay, it's very helpful. Right, so Hassan asks, I'm on a high protein, high fat diet. What are the ratios you suggest for boxers?
Well, that's a terrible diet for a boxer to start off with. No mention of carbohydrates. You either fight very, very flat or you recover very, very poorly. And if you don't, then at some point you'll hit the wall and, your performance will be limited. Ketogenic diets for fighters have their place at the beginning of camp when they've probably stuffed the face with carbs for a few months. So we need to improve the way that they utilize fat and also set very strict boundaries. And the intensity would be very, very low. They're not going to be fighting out high intensity, not going to be sparring yet. They're going to probably be doing work on the bike because they're too fat to run. We don't want to injure the knees and the hips and the ankles. So we do a lot of bike work, shadow boxing, and pad work, all stuff that they can do easy. That's when I would utilize a ketogenic diet. If you're deep in camp and needing to perform high intensity, then carbs are absolutely king. You are leaving so much performance on the table, or so much potential performance on the table, by not eating carbohydrates.
Right, so Jamie asks, is having salt water to hydrate yourself actually worth doing? And how do boxers recover whilst being able to do 2 or 3 sessions in a day?
So yeah, rehydration salts, which is more than just table salt, but rehydration salts, like stuff like from SIS, they're a great brand to use. I'm a big fan of their rehydration products. Or Mountain, I think it's pronounced Mountain, Maurten. They have an advanced rehydration formula, which is also very, very useful for boxers who've got another quick turnaround for training. So yeah, I would utilize electrolytes for boxers in their water. But I think a big thing is we focus on rehydrate, but a big thing we need to focus on is prehydrate. We need to make sure that hydration strategy starts before they even start that training session, and that's how we get ahead of ourselves. That's how we make sure that the body's got in it what it needs. So when you're coming out after, say, 12 rounds of sparring and 3 different opponents, and you've been drinking water throughout, the prehydrate that you had before, we just need to keep topping that up. We're not starting from a 0 point. 3 sessions is a lot for a boxer. I would question the effectiveness of 3 sessions a day for a fighter. I would question what the reason is for needing 3 sessions a day. That's overkill. I wouldn't think they'd be very intense sessions. If you're doing 3 sessions, none of them are going to be intense enough to need such real stringent acute recovery strategies. You'll probably need to be looking at overall recovery, which I think would be overall nutrition and sleep. That would probably be a key factor. With regards to if it's 2 sessions a day, which is very, very common, so AM would be a boxing session, PM would be some sort of conditioning or strength type session. I think making sure that, again, that they've got the right fuels. So making sure that the night before, if they've got a really hard session in the morning, they've got carbohydrates the night before, so they can wake up the next day and they don't have to have a huge amount of carbs and feel bloated and fall and feel like, they're going to have to drag themselves through a tough AM boxing session. And then again, recovery, higher in protein if they've got a strength session to prepare them for that, support the tendons. If it's a conditioning session, again, using the right type of carbohydrates to replenish glycogen from the morning session to then fuel the afternoon session. That would be my approach.
Okay. And Giuseppe asks, how to best adapt a diet that will not have you bounce back, regain all the weight? I'm guessing perhaps, well, I'll let you answer this one.
I mean, there was the whole reverse dieting fad that was around a while ago, and it was complete bunk. As far as I'm concerned, it's not realistic. It doesn't offer the metabolic benefits that it purported. But afterwards, like, I don't know. I think I'll just answer very blunt.
That's why I said something and paused, because I know knowing you personally, I know what's coming.
Listen, if your career as a boxer, like the day after you finish fighting is the day you should start preparing for your next fight. If that's your career, that sounds unrealistic, and people go, yeah, but you need a time off. But you only need time off if it gets so hard, and it only gets so hard if you come to every camp out of shape. If you can maintain a level of fitness, if you can maintain a weight that is realistic to cut down from during camp, if you can make your training camps about performance rather than weight loss, you will achieve far more. It's what other sports do. Professional footballers come back for the season, pre-season training, and they have to be within a certain body fat millimeter measurements. They have to have a certain percentage of the VO2 max. They have to hit certain metrics. It should be the same for boxers. Maintain some basic minimum standards. If you're worried about rebounding after a fight, then that tells me that you're going to go out and eat a load of food that you probably didn't need to eat, but you're mentally needed because you've had to constrain the diet so much in camp just to make weight. I'd assess what that is and why that is, rather than be worried about bouncing up in weight. Keep the diet as same as possible, like from 2 weeks before you had to start making weight. And you'll be in a good start point. If you let's say, give an example, you start a training camp at 85 kilos and you've got to make weight at 70 kilos and you've got 10 weeks to lose 15 kilos, you are up against it. If the next time training camp comes around and you're only 78 kilos and you've got 8 kilos to lose, I tell you now, you're going to be a phenomenal beast and get much fitter, much stronger, much more powerful, and make weight much easier. And a happy fighter is a dangerous fighter. That's what I always tell my fighters. Come into camp happy, not worried and sad that you're overweight and fat and need to just focus on losing weight. If you come into camp happy, you are dangerous. If you can bounce through that camp, eating well, sleeping well, recovering well, you're going to be ready come fight night. If you're sad and depressed because you're having to restrain yourself from food because you've bounced hard after, your weight's ballooned, you're not going to be as good a fighter. So yeah.
So what if this is someone who's a hobbyist? He boxes for a hobby, he works, he's got a family, he's trying to keep weight off as he approaches middle age. What's your advice to someone like that? Is it going to be the same sort of harsh truths?
I think it's being realistic with yourself. It's saying, like, this is a hobby. It doesn't need to be, something that I find depressing. I need to enjoy, like, what is food to me? And, it's time. Is it time to eat with the family? Is it time to enjoy a meal with friends? Can you do all the things and still improve your fitness and still enjoy your training? Like, life is to be enjoyed, but is enjoyment getting fat and sick from food? It's not. Is it, being unfit? It's clearly not. If you're dieting to maintain a certain weight and you feel it's getting too much, that's when I would address, like, I would have a closer look at nutrition. But if you're a hobbyist, eat whole foods, enjoy those whole foods, be creative, engage with the food, be social with food, and make it a family thing. And nutrition becomes a hell of a lot easier when you have that mindset around it, and know that it does help to fuel better workouts, the better quality fuel that you put in your body.
That's a great answer. So Danny, you probably covered some of this in the previous question. So Danny asked the best way to rehydrate and recover from intense training sessions, and does this change as you get older into your late 30s and 40s? So guys who are still boxing in their 40s, late 30s, does their recovery and rehydration change from someone who is late teens, early 20s?
Well, we know that recovery capabilities are far easier as a young lad. All that testosterone is found somewhat wanting as we get into past, into our 30s. Or unless like you're doping, like pure in boxing. But we'll not go there for this call. We'll do that on another one.
That would be an interesting one.
Yeah, it would. But yeah, I think does your rehydration strategy change as you age? Yeah, it can do. But also, like, we know that you're probably not training as hard as what a to a mid-20s bloke or even a late 20s fighter would be. So it's about understanding what hydration really is and what rehydration really is, and listening to your body and giving your body back what it really needs. If you're weighing yourself before you train, and after training you've dropped 2.5, 3 kilos, you need to put some serious fluid back in, and that's going to require some electrolytes as well to help, facilitate that rehydration. I think if you're training and you're getting a real sweat on, I don't think there's any harm in using rehydration salts, like electrolytes. And so yeah, I think having some sort of strategy is helpful. But again, it comes back to the focus on the pre-hydrate. First thing in the morning, we should start with water hydration. It's not a bad thing if you've got an early morning training session to take some electrolytes, because we know that we lose a lot of water through the night, get back to that hydrated state before we even start training. If we're always playing catch up, then are we ever performing optimally? And that's something that I say, I have a little saying with the fighters. It's it's a 3-2-1 go system. So 3 hours before bed is your last meal. 2 hours before bed, no more liquids. An hour before bed, no more blue light. So get off your phone. And first thing in the morning is go with your hydration. Start with pre-hydration straight away, because you're already dehydrated. So that's kind of like my thing. And it's the same that goes for the training. Have the same sort of system. If you're training hard, think about, am I going into that training session hydrated? Put back in what you've lost, and you won't go far wrong.
Okay. So Dan asks your view on meal replacement drinks. I know a lot of guys now, because the lifestyle now, just everyone's going so fast now in life, aren't they? They get up, go to work, come back, do this, do that. What's your view on meal replacement drinks as more and more people start taking these to replace the time they're not getting to eat?
I mean, that's well, it's not a difficult one to answer. Again, answering it bluntly, we all have time, like, for proper nutrition. It's priorities. Even if a boxer has, a full training camp, I wouldn't say a meal replacement shake is a bad thing. I'd just say, if that is becoming a common theme, I would ask, like, why can we not correct the nutrition? Why can we not? What is wrong with the situation to not be able to use whole foods?
But when you say common theme, is that once a day, twice a day, or once every few days? What would you refer to as common for meal replacement?
If a meal replacement shake, if that is every day, you're having to replace a meal with a shake, a convenience food, then I'd ask, like, could we be better prepared? Could we plan better? Could we make alternative choices that are just as convenient but offer a wider variety of nutrition? Not to say that they're a bad thing, just to say that I would want to understand why a client is opting for a meal replacement shake. What are the reasons behind that? And is the rest of the diet reflective of someone who is not planning, is not prepared, is not doing the shopping, is not engaging with the food, is the rest of the nutrition? Because what we do find is that a lot of people who do opt for meal replacement shakes, there are other failings in their nutrition plan as well, as in the things that could be improved. Like, I skip breakfast, they don't account for certain calories, they crash with the nutrition, the energy levels in the afternoon, so they feel they have to have these convenience options. Not to say, as I say, that convenience options are a bad thing, but sometimes they can be a reflection of overall nutritional choices as well. So I'd say, like, if it's a daily thing, then I'd say, well, is the rest of the nutrition on point? And if it isn't, it's just the time management, I don't want to think about food at that point because I've got so much on, then it's a good choice. If it's just a case of I'm making bad choices, so I just want to eat something, and therefore a meal replacement shake is my go-to. Then I would say, like, how can we better improve the rest of the diet instead of just relying on that shake? Because we know that that's going to be a limiting factor. If that's the only thing that you can grab at that time because you're not prepared, you're not planned, then we know that at some point other issues are going to present themselves as well.
Good stuff. All right, so last couple of questions. If someone asks you personally, from your experience, again, being around strength and conditioning coaches and being around world-class boxers, what are the best 3 weight training exercises a boxer can do, and also the top 3 exercises, perhaps again with weight, a boxer should avoid? Because I know there's those common sort of misconceptions around certain particular exercises. So what do you see as the best and worst for boxers?
Again, I'd go individual. Like that's very much it depends. I've seen boxers with terrible shoulder mobility trying to do landmine presses, like the big punch ones, and generating zero power at all. I'm a big fan of trap bar deadlifts for a lot of fighters, developing that lower body whilst bracing the upper body. I'm a big fan of lunges, anything that opens up the hips with some weight. I'm a big fan of things like that for boxers. I think a lot of boxers can become quite stiff in the hips. Other exercises, I think any type of dynamic pushing work would be quite decent as well. To nail down specific individual one-off exercise that I would say the best, it would be impossible for me to do. It would really, really depend. But I think an accomplished all-round athletic body is key for a boxer. So any limitations is where I would start with a fighter. Like where are the weak points? Where are they stiff? Where can they not move? Where can they not generate power? Where are they losing power? I've worked with a guy, Corey Herbert, who's a good friend of mine, strength and conditioning coach. And his approach is meticulous. He's just looking for what part of the body is causing a drop in power. He uses a whole host of data. And I've seen him do certain exercises for boxers and then say to other boxers, you must never do that exercise. Because he's looking like where is the individual not as powerful or not as competent as they should be as a fighter. Worst exercises, I would say, I'm really not a fan for boxers of chair dips, like where you have your hands behind you like that, and you're doing a dip. I forgot what they're called now. But if you're doing on a chair or a bench dips, I'm really not a fan of the angle of the shoulder for that. And I think the shoulder is such an important joint for boxers. The amount of power that you
bench dip or bench press. I mean
bench dips, yeah. So bench behind you, and you've got your feet on another bench in front. Very unnatural for the shoulder. Yeah, not a fan of that exercise. Extensive road running, not a huge fan of that either. And bicep curls. I don't want to see boxers really do bicep curls. Not really see how. I think that's a waste of energy for them.
Too many injuries as well, especially up throwing hooks and you tear biceps because you're too stiff when doing the bicep curls.
Yeah, exactly.
So because you get common misconceptions about the bench press, for example. I see it online a lot, whether or not you should do the bench press. So what's your view on the bench press for in boxing? Is it a myth that people should not be doing it, or is it just the way you do it, the rep ranges?
I think I like it as an exercise. Bench press, it transfers over for a lot of athletic development. You've got to look at have they got the shoulder stability to really load up? Are we preserving the shoulders? Are we utilizing the right muscles to actually get the most out of this exercise? Or is it like for most people in the gym, is it an ego lift and the forms all over the place? Any exercise performed incorrectly at too heavy a weight is an injury risk, and that's probably something we're not really chatted about either much. But the best exercise you can do are the ones where you're never going to get injured from, because your job is to get in there and perform. You can't do that if you're injured. So it's all about preserving the body, making the body as robust and resilient as possible, so it can get in to live to fight another day, so to speak. So yeah, I'm a fan of the bench press. I think it can be good for shoulder health. I think it's good for tricep development, stability in the shoulders as well, and obviously good for power and force production. Yaz Parr has programmed variations of the bench press for different forms of the bench press for different fighters that I've worked with, and we've seen huge benefits in that as well. So yeah, I think it has its place for sure.
I suppose it's a temptation, like I said, not to make it into an ego lift, which is where you then get problems with shoulder injuries or going too heavy too soon.
Exactly.
No one around you to guide you on it. Okay,
Exactly.
but it's really good to get your views on these questions, because a lot of boxers won't have access to someone like yourself to advise them on these things. So because you worked with world-class boxers, a lot of people sending questions, maybe amateurs or coming up as boxers, but just don't have access to minds like yourself. So for you to give the advice on these questions, I think it's been really insightful and really helpful as well. I've learned a lot myself as well, which is always a plus.
Yep.
Okay, so
Good, mate.
I mean that's all the questions I'd like to ask you. I mean, it's been great having you on. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great catching up with you again after all these years.
Yeah, of course, mate. Likewise. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
We
Hope
should
I've added some
definitely do
value.
this again. We've got so much more I think you can offer as well. So many different questions coming in, so I'm sure a lot of others want to pick your brains as well.
Of course, mate.
Yeah, don't forget as well to send me those links from the Victors.
Yep,
We'll get those
I
up,
shall do, mate.
and we'll get this up on YouTube and Instagram very soon.
Wicked, mate. Thank
Good
you
stuff. Cheers.
for the questions. Appreciate it. Take care, mate.
Yeah, you too, mate.